Allegedly, the Chicago Teachers Union president is sending their child not to Chicago public schools, but to a private school. And the controversy continues to mount. It is Springfield's Morning News on 92.7 WMAY. Springfield's News and Talk. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this at 217-629-7970. So this story's been floating around for about a week now. A little bit less than. And it's about Stacey Davis Gates, who was to become the president of the Chicago Teachers Union in 2012. And she makes about $150,000 a year. That's a decent salary. I don't know if she's married and has a husband that also is getting some income, but even on that $150,000 salary, you can afford to send a child to a private school. But Davis Gates has publicly spoken against school choice, and in particular, the state's Invest in Kids school scholarship program, which, again, we've talked about before, allows donors to get a 75% Illinois income tax credit for contributions to a fund that then can go to families to send their kid to a school of their choice. If legislators don't extend the program, it ends at the end of this calendar year. But Davis Gates on Twitter, X is what it's known as now, she said that the school choice program was actually the choice, quote, of racists, and that it was designed to, quote, avoid integrating schools with black children. But since then, reports have indicated that Davis Gates is sending her child to a private school of her choice. Now, my reporter Andrew Hensel reached out to the CTU president, did not get a request for comment, but something that obviously is pretty controversial. Ted Dabrowski with WirePoints, he's been sounding off on this on WirePoints' website. But obviously, this is a controversial issue that's getting a lot of attention online. I'd love to hear your thoughts at 217-629-7970. Again, 217-629-7970. But let's go ahead and hear what Ted Dabrowski had to say on this issue and what he sees as a hypocrisy.
The reality is that when it comes to sending their own kids there, then there's a big problem. And that's because when you look at CPS, just 11 of every 100 kids, black kids at CPS can read a grade level. And that's something probably that Stacey Davis Gates doesn't like. She wants her kids to go to better schools.
And Dabrowski continued on with the questions of hypocrisy here.
And so this is one of those examples of, school choice for me, but not for thee. So she's obviously, happy to use the choice that she can afford to send her kids away from CPS, but won't allow other people to have a choice.
So obviously, you can kind of just see the questions mounting of how can somebody be the public school teachers union president in Chicago, the third largest teachers union in the country, advocating for public school but sending their child allegedly to a private school. Let's go ahead and take some calls at 217-629-7970. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
To me, it's just like working for a city and you are forced to live in that city and send your kids to that school district. I don't think it's fair. An employer has to dictate where you live and where you send your kids to school. I think if you can afford to send your kids to a private school, by all means do it.
Well, and you're referencing like the residency requirement for the city of Springfield, which has that in place for most city employees. I forget, are the cops and police, or is it just the police and fire, or is it just fire? I can't remember if they're excluded from residency requirements. Do you know that?
I believe it's anybody hired after 2015, if I remember right. There's a certain date, like October 1st of 2015.
Yeah. But I think there were still ongoing contract negotiations with fire and police. I can't remember what the latest status was with that concerning residency. But yeah, I mean, listen, the families in Chicago send their kids to Chicago public schools, right? If they have the funds to be able to send them to a private school, they probably will, looking at the proficiency rates in CPS. It's not just CPS, it's elsewhere throughout the state where you have poorly performing schools, and families don't really have much of a choice. except for that Invest in Kids school choice scholarship program that the state has that's set to expire at the end of the year if lawmakers don't re-up that. But your thoughts on just this hypocrisy of the allegation that the Chicago Teachers Union president is sending her child to a private school?
Well, Langfelder sent his kids to SHG, so that's
But there's a clear difference between the city of Springfield and Springfield District 186. Those are two totally separate, different taxing bodies. Up in Chicago, it's not the case. Chicago city government runs the city school system, and the city school system hires teachers who are in a union with the Chicago Teachers Union. And you've got the union that's always very much against private school or voucher systems or school choice programs. But the CTU president allegedly is sending their child to a private school. So people are seeing that as hypocrisy. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Well, they should, because let's face it, the union basically wants a monopoly. They want to be the only game in town, so you have no choice. Because let's face it, private schools make public schools look bad, because at a private school, the cost to educate a students with half or less of what we're paying for a public school. Now, why would that be? Is it that they're better, or they're better at management, or they have less management? I don't know. But the outcomes, and people will argue that the outcome at private schools is far better. Well, it is. But let's face it, most people who can afford private schools are a two-parent family, and two-parent families commonly, if you look at the statistics, will almost always generate a smarter child with better opportunities. So I can never look at a public school and private school and compare the two and say, well, you've got better outcomes than we do, because, well, take a look at the families that are there and let's just see. But it is a cheaper thing for a private school to run. Why is that? Are they just better? Are their teachers worse paid? What is that? And if you have nothing to compare it to, if you're the only game in town, well, you're just going to have to put up with it. But if you're not, then there is a reason why we can complain about Chicago teachers getting overpaid or administrators making $500,000 a year or whatever their salaries are.
And it's also the issue of the average cost per student in public school in Illinois. I want to say it's like $16,000 on average. You look at some of the districts in Southern Illinois, it's $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 per student. But then you look at some of the cost per student in Chicago, and it's north of 20,000 plus, if not more.
And if you look at some of the private schools here locally, some of the top private schools here locally, we're not looking at fees of $13,000, $15,000, $18,000. $6,000, $7,000, $8,000. It's crazy.
I'll have to take a look at some of those numbers. I appreciate the call. 217-629-7970. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
How you doing?
Good. Yourself?
I didn't wake up in the morgue. Hey, I just want to give a shout out to a place called the Washington Street Mission.
Sure, right on.
It is located on North 4th Street, right next to Sangamon Towers. Right now, one of the things they really, really need is laundry soap, liquid laundry soap, and not dish. But
well, I appreciate that. Washington Street Mission, more power to them. They need washing soap. So if you are any giving spirits, then you can obviously give to them. I did want to air some of what Governor J.B. Pritzker had to say on the issue of unions. All right, as we're talking about unions, you heard the story of some staffers at the Illinois State House looking to unionize. Governor J.B. Pritzker was asked about this yesterday, and the union has yet to be recognized by Speaker Welch. But Pritzker says, hey, everybody's got a right to collectively bargain as the state constitution now dictates.
Well, let's start with the point of the Workers' Rights Amendment is that workers should have the right to collectively bargain wherever they are. And, as far as I'm concerned, I think the Speaker believes the same as I do, that that's true for everybody in the state, every position in the state. And so I don't think there's anybody that's attempting to prevent people from organizing. It does take time. There does need to be a point at which the organizers get their workers together to determine what it is that they want, and the management gets its team together to meet with them. I think it's just a time question, and also a question about whether the other people who work in state government for the legislature want to be part of a union because, again, nobody's preventing anybody from having a union. No one's also saying you have to be unionized, right? And you know that our workforce in Illinois, about 14% of our overall workforce is unionized, 14%. So it's not an enormous number, but again, nobody should prevent people from getting together to organize, and I don't think anybody is.
Well, do you support the efforts of these 20 in Speaker Welch's office?
I don't know the specifics of what they're demanding, and of course, I support their ability to. That's why we supported the Workers' Rights Amendment. I think we all believe, those of us that supported it, that workers that want to get together in a workplace to organize should have the right to do.
So as we're talking about union stuff, figured I'd share what the governor's thoughts are on the issue of some state house staffers looking to unionize. All right, if you need to stay on top of all that and more, follow me, Bishop on Air, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Just search Bishop on Air.